It's another edition of Time About the Movies. It's the weekend of September 14th, 1990, and we've got 7 movies to look at today, so let's not waste any time. Let's get right on into it. We have a lot of movies to get to, so let's go ahead and start with the first one here, based off the book by Carrie Fisher, Meryl Streep and Shirley MacLaine and Mike Nichols, Postcards from the Edge. This is an overall really good movie. One of the things that I really liked about this movie is how Carrie Fisher took her book about some of the trials and tribulations that she had to go through in her career with her mother and all these and all these elements, and they actually made a pretty fun little comedy, a dramatic comedy out of it. And it definitely shows up here on screen. Meryl Streep does a very good job fitting into the role of this actress, Suzanne Vale, which is basically Carrie Fisher's personality from the book. And then you have Shirley MacLaine here playing her mother. You also have Dennis Quaid in here, who gives a good performance, as well as Annette Bening in one of her early roles. And you also have Gene Hackman in this, as well as Richard Dreyfuss. Rob Reiner's also in here, too. There's a very good cast here. The music overall is very well done. It's got Carly Simon music on here. And the song, I'm Checking Out, was actually nominated for an Academy Award that year. And, yeah, it's an overall really enjoyable movie. It's very funny. It's very good. The dramatic elements are not too over the top or crazy. They feel earnest. They feel very, very earnest. And I like the chemistry of MacLaine and Streep here as mother and daughter. They're very good in this movie. And the movie just has a good sense of humor to itself that makes it a very enjoyable comedy. If you like seeing some of Mike Nichols' best works, this is definitely one of his best movies, in my opinion. So, yeah, definitely see Postcards from the Edge if you haven't seen it already. So, with that said, let's get on to the next movie, and that is Jean-Claude Van Damme's next film after Kickboxer and Bloodsport. It's Death Warrant. Of course, one of the most notable things about this movie is that David S. Goyer actually wrote this, and this was the first script he sold and produced commercially. And of course, that would lead him to bigger and better things after this. He would also work on stuff like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the movie from '98, the Nick Fury movie, the Blade trilogy, the Dark Knight trilogy, Man of Steel, The Invisible, The Unborn, Dark City, the Call of Duty series. I mean, this is one of his earliest film works, and for the most part, it's what you'd expect. It's a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. It's Van Damme doing what Van Damme does best. And it's stupid, but it's stupid story-wise. It's a very formulaic script. The villain's not that good. The plot is kind of all over the place. The director, Darren Sarafian, not a very good director. This would feel like more of a direct-to-video movie. But I'll give it credit, though, that it does have a good performance by Van Damme, and the action sequences overall are very good. These are very good action sequences featured in this film in particular. Like I said, it is what it is. If you're going into this movie expecting is an over-the-top action movie, you definitely get that, especially for a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. But other than that, though, it is fine for what it is. So let's go ahead and move on to the next movie. Yeah, a lot of people forget this was actually a top 10 movie at the box office when it first came out. It actually made money. And this is, of course, Hardware, the British sci-fi horror film from Richard Stanley, who you may know as the director of Color Outer Space with Nicolas Cage from a few years back. But many of you probably don't know that he was also attached to direct The Island of Dr. Moreau in the 90s, the movie that featured Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer. And it was supposed to be a very different movie than the one we've got, but it had a very troubled production history, and Stanley has made documentaries about, well, he didn't make a documentary, he was part of a documentary talking about what his Dr. Moreau would have been like. But we'll delve more into that when we get to that movie in a couple of years down the line. But in terms of this movie, I have not seen it before. It's a cult film. It has a following to it, but I mean, it looks pretty good. I mean, like I said, I haven't seen it before, so I can't really comment on it. Got some notable names in here: Dylan McDermott, Stacey Travis. You also have appearances by Lemmy, Carl McCoy, Iggy Pop. So they got a pretty good cast here. The movie looks pretty good too, like this post-apocalyptic Mad Max meets Total Recall kind of movie here. So I mean, it could be good. It might be something I'll definitely check out one day, but I'm not really gonna watch it immediately. But definitely has a lot of promise to it. So let's go ahead and move on to the next movie. That movie, of course, is Repossessed, which was coming out around the time that The Exorcist 3 came out. And it was also the movie that kind of proved that if Leslie Nielsen isn't working with the Zucker brothers, chances are the spoof comedy that he's in is probably not going to be all that good, because, man, this is a disappointment of a movie, especially since you have the original girl that was possessed, Regan McNeil, Linda Blair from The Exorcist, in this movie. You would think that maybe you could have had something much better than what this is. This is a mess of a movie, man. And like I said, it's all because of the writing and the direction. Like, the Zucker brothers have a unique way of making a spoof movie that can still hold up, even when there's stuff in there that's very dated. You can still laugh about it years later. That's what makes the Naked Gun movies so special. That's what makes movies like the Airplane movie so special. The Abrams, who would later do Hot Shots. That's why those movies still hold up as well. This movie, not so much. It's a disappointment, too, because, again, you have Linda Blair here. You also have Ned Beatty. But you also have elements here where you can spoof many of the things in the time period, like the televangelist scandals of the 1980s, the Tammy Faye Bakers and all that kind of stuff. And it's just not there. It's just dated comedy that just really doesn't work all that well. And it's very short, too. Even for a short movie that's about just under 90 minutes, it feels long and boring, man. It's just like, it's not a good comedy whatsoever. It's a disappointment, too. And it's, again, a very big disappointment, especially considering the talent on board here. But that's sadly what you have to do, because, like I said, this was one of the first the movies that they were trying to copy the success of the Naked Gun movies with, and it just doesn't work, especially with Frank Drebin in your movie, Leslie Nielsen. It just didn't work. It was a mess of a movie all around, and it came and went, essentially. So that's Repossessed for you. So let's go ahead and move on to the next movie, which is State of Grace, which is an overall really good movie that unfortunately got overshadowed by a classic movie the following week, and we'll talk more about that later on in the video, and then when we get to that one next week. But State of Grace is a great movie, man. If you haven't seen this movie, it's a really good, well-made movie. It's a neo-noir crime film written by Dennis McKintrey, a playwright, and it also features Sean Penn, Ed Harris, Gary Oldman, Robin Wright, John Turturro, the music of Ennio Morricone, Phil Giannano, who directed Gridiron Gang later on down the road, directed this movie, and it's a very good movie. It's a very good crime movie that, again, got overshadowed by a far superior movie the following week. It's a great movie. If you like Sean Penn at his best, this is definitely one of his best movies, a very underrated movie. Definitely check this movie out if you can find it. State of Grace, really great film. Fortunately got overshadowed by a far superior movie, which kind of sucks. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on to the next movie, which is White Hunter Blackheart, the latest film from Clint Eastwood. This is, of course, based on the stories by Peter Vitrell, who worked on The African Queen, and this is a thinly disguised account of his experiences working on The African Queen, which was one of the few movies back in the 1950s that was shot outside of the U.S. It was one of the first movies to be shot internationally, like in Africa. But this movie basically follows a similar story here, where you have John Wilson, the director of it, played by Clint Eastwood, and Peter Vitrell in this movie is played by Jeff Fahey, who would later become known as the Lawnmower Man. And this is a pretty good Clint Eastwood movie, honestly. It's one that doesn't really get a whole lot of credit, or doesn't really get talked about all that much, because Eastwood's legacy is just is stacked with so many good movies. But this is an overall really enjoyable movie. I had a good time watching this one. This is one of his movies where you could see him putting in this great performance, him and Jeff Fahey. You also have George DeZundra, who was also in, now I can't remember. George DeZundra, who was also in Basic Instinct. He was also on Law & Order, Batman the Animated Series, among many other movies, TV shows. And it's it is a good movie. It's a movie that's very well made. Maybe not one of Eastwood's best movies, but definitely one of his more underrated movies, honestly. If you want to see the best of Clint Eastwood's movies, I would say definitely check out White Hunter Blackheart if you can. So, let's go ahead and move on to the last movie, and that is Fools of Fortune. Fools of Fortune is based off of a story by William Trevor. It's basically a Protestant family caught in the conflict between the British Army and the IRA during the Irish War of Independence. You have Ian Glennon here, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, Julie Christie, Catherine McFadden. Some notable names in here, but I don't know. The trailer just feels more like a parody than an actual movie. Like, this is supposed to be a movie that's taken very seriously, but did anything about that trailer really look like they were taking it seriously? Like, a lot of overacting in there, a lot of moments that feel melodramatic and just over the top, and just it looks like a bad movie. And the reviews for this movie did not sound too promising for it. It's never been available on DVD or Blu-ray. It's only been available on VHS and Laserdisc, so that should tell you right there that, yeah, this movie doesn't have that strong of a legacy to it. Even though this is one of Hans Zimmer's early score works as well. But, yeah, this movie looks way more hilarious than I think they were intending it to. This is supposed to be like a serious, roaring epic, and it doesn't even feel anything like that, unfortunately, so... Haven't seen it though. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe what I'm reading is wrong, but I don't know. Fools of Fortune. So that wraps that up. And with that said, we're going to wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. The next time around, a pretty good week on hand. 6 movies to look at, including 2 classic movies, Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas and the Coen brothers' Miller's Crossing. We also have Gene Hackman in Narrow Margin, Gene Wilder in Funny About Love. We also have The Boyfriend School and The Tall Guy. So we have 6 movies to look at, and at least 2 of them I know are classic movies. I'm going to have a good time talking about these ones when we get to that one next week. But, I should say next episode, but we'll get to next week's movies on the next episode. That's what I want to say. So, with that said, thank you guys for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, check out the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode. I'll see you guys tomorrow for another video. So until the next time I see you, take care.